there comes a moment in life when everything you once clung to, your identity, your plans, your relationships, your sense of certainty, suddenly begins to fall apart. You're left staring at the shattered pieces of who you used to be, wondering how you got here and how you'll ever begin again. It feels like failure. It feels like the end. But what if it's not? What if this collapse, this deep unraveling, is not your destruction, but your awakening? What if the pain, the confusion, the stillness, is the space where something real can finally be born? You see, we spend so much of our lives becoming what others expect. We build ourselves around survival, around fear, validation, comfort, and old stories that were never truly ours. But the soul doesn't want comfort. It wants truth. And sometimes the only way to find that truth is to break down everything that isn't real. This isn't about fixing yourself. This is about you finding yourself. Rebuilding is not a return to who you were. It's a journey toward who you're meant to become. So if you're standing in the ruins of your old life, know this: you're not lost. You're on sacred ground. Let's begin. Destruction, whether emotional, psychological, or circumstantial, often appears as a terrifying end. It can feel like the collapse of everything familiar, the relationships that once defined us, the career paths we poured ourselves into, the belief systems we clung to, or the identity we carefully crafted over years. But within that collapse lies the quiet call to transformation. When the structure of who we once were begins to break down, it doesn't mean we have failed. It often means that something within us has outgrown its current form and can no longer be contained by it. This internal dissonance seeks expression in the outer world. What feels like destruction is frequently the soul's way of initiating a shift toward a more authentic version of ourselves. The process of destruction clears away what no longer serves us. Just as fire removes dead branches to make way for new growth in a forest, moments of personal collapse burn through our illusions, attachments, and false securities. This often happens when we least expect it, and certainly when we feel least prepared. The loss of a relationship might expose how we have been betraying ourselves for years. The end of a job might highlight how misaligned we've been with our deeper passions. Emotional breakdowns might reveal truths we've buried for decades. On the surface, these events seem catastrophic. But underneath, there's an invisible order attempting to emerge, a new shape of being struggling to be born. Transformation doesn't come gently. The human ego, designed to maintain safety and consistency, resists change. It clings to what is known, even if that familiarity is painful. This is why many people feel deep suffering when the old structures begin to fall. It is the death of the known and the terrifying uncertainty of the unknown. But the breakdown is not meant to destroy us. It's meant to free us from what was never truly us to begin with. When we are no longer able to keep pretending, when the weight of carrying an outdated self becomes unbearable, the collapse comes as a mercy. It is the soul's uprising, breaking the shell of comfort to allow the emergence of something more true, more alive, and more whole. Destruction gives us the rare opportunity to start again. Not from nothing, but from truth. It strips away the layers we thought we needed and leaves us with the raw materials of who we really are. In that space, we begin to question everything. Who am I without this role, this person, this belief? What do I value when the noise fades away? What kind of life do I wish to rebuild now that the illusion has shattered? These questions are painful, but they are also sacred. They point us back to our essence. They ask us not to return to what was, but to reimagine what could be. Every great transformation in life starts with some form of destruction. It may not be visible from the outside. It may take place in the quiet spaces of our minds, in the solitude of our hearts. But those inner revolutions are just as powerful as the external ones. They clear the ground so that something new, something more aligned with who we truly are, can take root. The chaos is not meaningless. It is the womb of change. When we allow ourselves to step into the fire, to stand amidst the ruins without rushing to rebuild too quickly, we begin to hear that inner voice growing louder, more confident, more certain. It is the voice of the self being reborn, not in opposition to the destruction, but because of it. Rebuilding yourself requires more than simply changing your habits or mindset. It demands that you face the parts of yourself you've spent years avoiding. These hidden aspects, often referred to as the shadow, contain all the suppressed fears, insecurities, impulses, and desires you were taught to reject or hide. From childhood onwards, society, family, and cultural norms condition us to fit a mold. To survive, we disown certain parts of ourselves. The anger, the jealousy, the vulnerability, the grief, and project a curated version of who we think we're supposed to be. But what's left behind in the dark doesn't disappear. It festers, it grows, and it influences us in unconscious ways. To truly rebuild, you must turn inward and bring light to what has been buried. The shadow is not your enemy. It's your teacher. It holds the key to your healing. Every time you react strongly to someone else's behavior, every time you sabotage your own progress, every time you numb your emotions rather than feel them, your shadow is speaking. It is trying to get your attention, not to hurt you, but to show you where you are still unhealed. By confronting these parts of yourself, you begin to reclaim lost pieces of your identity. Pieces that, once integrated, make you whole again. Facing the shadow isn't an act of indulgence, it's an act of courage. It takes deep self-honesty to admit that the pain you've blamed others for is often rooted in your own unacknowledged wounds. The betrayal you fear may stem from your own lack of self-trust. The anger you direct outward may be a reflection of shame you've never spoken. It's uncomfortable, even painful, to explore these aspects of yourself, but by doing so, you take back your power. You begin to act consciously rather than react unconsciously. You stop being a prisoner of your patterns and become the architect of your evolution. The shadow also holds immense creative and spiritual potential. What you once dismissed as weakness may actually be a source of sensitivity, intuition, or empathy. What you feared as rage may be a suppressed need for justice or boundaries. When you integrate the shadow, you stop fighting against yourself. You no longer divide your identity into acceptable and unacceptable. You become more whole, more human, more real. This authenticity becomes the foundation for the new self you are building. You're no longer living a performance. You're living your truth. This process is not linear. The shadow shows up in layers. Just when you think you've resolved an issue, it may reappear in a deeper or more nuanced form. That's not regression, it's refinement. Each time you meet your shadow, you gain greater awareness and resilience. You begin to notice how your inner world shapes your outer reality. You see how your unhealed pain influences your choices, your relationships, and even your goals. And with each revelation, you are given the chance to shift, not by force, but by understanding. To walk this path is to walk through discomfort. It's to sit with your emotions rather than bypass them. It's to ask difficult questions about your motives, your fears, and your history. But it's also to uncover the gold hidden in the dark. The shadow holds not just pain, but potential. Not just wounds, but wisdom. The more you integrate what you once rejected, the more empowered you become. You are no longer fragmented. You are unified. You don't need to fix yourself. You need to find yourself in all the places you were taught to hide. Rebuilding begins with reclaiming everything you are, especially the parts you once believed made you unlovable. Rebuilding yourself demands a deep and often painful willingness to let go of the false self. The version of you constructed to earn approval, avoid rejection, and fit into expectations that never truly belong to you. This false self is not built from authenticity, but from adaptation. From early childhood, most people begin shaping their identity around what others need them to be. A quiet child becomes a people pleaser who keeps in a chaotic home. A sensitive soul puts on a mask of toughness to survive in a harsh environment. A dreamer may abandon their imagination to chase security. Layer by layer, the real self is buried beneath roles, masks, and illusions until it becomes difficult to distinguish between is genuine and what is merely performance. This artificial self may bring temporary success, validation, or belonging, but it comes at a cost. Disconnection from your inner truth. You may climb a career ladder that doesn't fulfill you, enter relationships that don't nurture you, or pursue goals that aren't your own. Even your emotional responses become conditioned, automatic, and detached from your core. You smile when you're hurting. You agree when you disagree. You show up, but not as yourself. Over time, this misalignment creates a deep inner tension that surfaces as anxiety, emptiness, confusion, or even a complete collapse of identity. Letting go of the false self means releasing everything you've become out of fear and choosing to rediscover who you are out of truth. It begins with asking hard questions. Who am I beneath my achievements? Who would I be if I wasn't afraid of judgment? What parts of me have I silenced just to be accepted? These questions don't have immediate answers, but they open the door to self-inquiry and honest reflection. The unraveling of the false self isn't an overnight act. It's a slow peeling back of protective layers you once thought were necessary for survival. This process is unsettling because the false self often feels like the only identity you've known. Letting go means stepping into a void where old definitions no longer apply. The roles you've played, whether as a caretaker, the strong one, the achiever, or the outsider, begin to dissolve, and what remains is the raw, unfiltered you. At first, this may feel like weakness or loss, but it is actually the beginning of strength. Only in this space of surrender can the real self begin to emerge. As you release the need to perform, conform, and please, you start to experience moments of clarity. You notice what genuinely brings you joy rather than what gains you applause. You feel the difference between connection and attachment, between purpose and pressure. You start speaking in your real voice, moving at your own pace, and choosing from intention rather than impulse. This is the rebuilding process, not constructing another mask, but allowing what is real to take form. Letting go of the false self also means setting boundaries around what you allow into your life. You begin to say no to relationships, environments, and expectations that no longer align with your truth. You may outgrow people who only knew you as your mask. You may be misunderstood by those who benefited from your inauthenticity. But this disconnection is necessary to make space for real connection with yourself and others. Every time you honor your truth, even in small ways, you take another step toward integrity. The foundation of your new self isn't built on who others need you to be, but on who you were always meant to be. As you shed the layers of the false self, you don't become someone new. You uncover someone ancient, someone wise, someone whole. Rebuilding doesn't start with adding more to your life. It starts with letting go of what was never truly yours. Pain, while often seen as something to escape, is one of life's most potent sculptors. It chisels away the layers of illusion, comfort, and false identity that no longer serve you. Pain doesn't arrive without purpose. It's a signal, a teacher, a fire that both burns and purifies. When life feels unbearable, when emotional wounds cut deep, when spiritual emptiness grips your chest, that is often the very moment when transformation begins. Pain has a strange way of showing us exactly where we are still asleep, where we are clinging to what's broken, or where we have abandoned ourselves in the name of survival. Most people spend their lives trying to avoid pain. They numb it through distraction, suppress it through forced positivity, or deny it through pretense. But buried pain does not disappear. It only deepens, manifesting as anxiety, depression, addiction, rage, or chronic dissatisfaction. It seeps into the choices we make, the people we attract, and the way we speak to ourselves. Avoiding pain only gives it more power. But when we turn toward it, not with resistance, but with curiosity, we discover that pain holds wisdom. It exposes the lies we've believed, the stories we've internalized, and the boundaries we've failed to set. It highlights what needs to be healed in order for the rebuilding process to be real. Pain is not weakness. It is not something to be ashamed of or hidden away. It is the soul's cry for attention, the body's signal for care, and the heart's longing for truth. The deepest pain often arises when we are out of alignment, when our external lives no longer reflect our internal values. That inner dissonance creates a fracture that cannot be ignored. And though it may feel like suffering, it is often the necessary crack through which light enters. When you sit with your pain instead of fleeing from it, you begin to understand its language. You feel the weight of suppressed grief, the sting of betrayal, the ache of abandonment. But you also begin to see what lies underneath your capacity to feel deeply, to love fiercely, and to rise with new clarity. Rebuilding through pain means allowing it to refine you, not define you. You begin to see pain not as an enemy, but as an initiation. It teaches you what really matters, what you can no longer tolerate, and what you must now demand of yourself and others. Pain brings awareness. And with awareness comes the power to change. You learn to hold space for your emotions instead of judging them. You give yourself permission to break down, and knowing that the breakdown is part of the breakthrough. It is through pain that compassion is born. Compassion for yourself, for your past, and for the journey that shaped you. When you allow pain to do its work, something beautiful begins to emerge. Strength that is not brittle, but grounded. Confidence that is not loud, but steady. Wisdom that is not borrowed, but earned. This strength is not built in the absence of pain. It is forged through it. Every scar becomes a story of resilience. Every tear becomes a symbol of growth. The more pain you've walked through with open eyes and an open heart, the more you carry the depth and grace needed to rebuild a life of integrity. Rebuilding through pain doesn't mean you forget what hurt you. It means you learn to see it differently. You take what was meant to destroy you and use it as fuel. Pain strips away illusions, but in doing so, it reveals the truth. It invites you to rise, not in spite of what you've endured, but because of it. What remains after pain has passed through you is not weakness, but the unshakable foundation of who you truly are. Rebuilding yourself is not about returning to a previous version of who you were before things fell apart. It's about consciously creating a new internal architecture, an entirely new framework that reflects your truth, not your trauma. When you rebuild from within, you don't just make surface-level changes, you rewire the very structure of how you think, feel, relate, and live. This process requires deep self-awareness and radical honesty. It starts by recognizing that the old internal patterns, beliefs formed in childhood, emotional responses learned through survival, coping mechanisms developed in pain, can no longer support the life you are now called to create. Most people try to change their external reality first. They seek new relationships, jobs, or environments, believing those things will bring peace. But real, lasting transformation begins on the inside. The inner world must be rebuilt first because it is the foundation for everything else. If your inner beliefs are rooted in unworthiness, fear, or self-doubt, no external success will ever feel like enough. If your inner boundaries are weak, no outer boundary will hold. If your values are unclear, your decisions will always feel conflicted. You must become the architect of your new self, designing from your highest wisdom rather than your old wounds. This rebuilding involves redefining your core values. You have to ask yourself what truly matters to you. Not what you were told should matter, but what deeply resonates with your soul. Is it peace, freedom, authenticity, connection, purpose? When you get clear on these values, they become your compass. They guide your choices, shape your relationships, and determine what you allow or refuse. You also begin to notice how much of your old life was built around values that weren't yours. Maybe you chased success when your heart longed for simplicity. Maybe you valued loyalty so deeply that you tolerated betrayal. Rebuilding means aligning every layer of your being with what is truly meaningful. You also begin to reconstruct your belief system. Many of the beliefs you hold about yourself, your worth, your capacity, your identity, were shaped by moments of fear, rejection, or failure. They became internalized stories that you carried like truth. But beliefs are not facts. They are patterns, and they can be rewritten. Rebuilding involves challenging these beliefs and choosing new ones rooted in empowerment. You begin to shift from "I'm not enough" to "I am evolving," from "always fail" to "every setback is a lesson." These new beliefs don't emerge overnight. They are cultivated through consistent reflection, compassion, and the courage to think differently. Equally important in this internal architecture are boundaries. Many people rebuild their lives without reinforcing the foundation with strong inner boundaries, and they find themselves collapsing again. Inner boundaries mean knowing where you end and others begin. They involve saying no to what drains you, protecting your energy, and being accountable to your own needs. You stop living reactively and start living intentionally. These boundaries aren't walls, they are doors. They help you decide what enters and what stays out, based on your inner alignment. You also redesign your emotional landscape. Rather than avoiding or suppressing feelings, you learn to move through them. You create space within yourself to hold anger without becoming destructive, sadness without falling into despair, joy without guilt. You become fluent in your own emotional language. This internal safety creates resilience. You no longer depend on the outside world to regulate your emotional state, because you've built the strength and self-trust to do it within. Every part of this new architecture, values, beliefs, boundaries, emotional intelligence, creates a foundation that is solid, sacred, and sustainable. It reflects not who the world told you to be, but who you choose to become. You are no longer rebuilding a facade. You are constructing a life rooted in depth, clarity, and truth. The structure may be new, but the soul that builds it remembers exactly who it is. Living from soul rather than survival is the most profound shift a human being can make when rebuilding their life. Survival mode is a state of contraction. It's driven by fear, scarcity, and self-protection. It's where many people operate unconsciously, making decisions not from inspiration but from anxiety. In survival, the focus is on getting through the day, avoiding pain, controlling outcomes, and staying safe at all costs. It's reactive, not creative. You shrink yourself to be accepted. You overextend to be needed. You hold back your truth to avoid conflict. You begin to believe that life is something to endure rather than something to embody fully. This mode is not your fault. It's a response to trauma, conditioning, and lived experiences where you had to prioritize safety over authenticity. But survival is meant to be temporary. It is not a place to build a life from. The longer you stay in that state, the more disconnected you become from your soul. The soul does not operate from fear. It speaks in the language of expansion, love, alignment, and purpose. Where survival says, just get by, soul says fully live. Where survival avoids risk, soul seeks growth. Where survival protects the mask, soul reveals the truth. Rebuilding yourself from the inside out means learning to recognize the voice of survival and gently turning down its volume. That voice is loud, urgent, and filled with shoulds. It tells you to settle for less, to stay small, to not ask for too much. The soul's voice, by contrast, is subtle but steady. It whispers of what you're capable of, what feels right even if it doesn't make sense to others, what choices bring peace rather than validation. Learning to live from soul requires slowing down enough to listen. In a noisy world where everything pulls your attention outward, the soul quietly waits for you to come inward. When you live from soul, your choices begin to shift. You no longer pursue goals based on external definitions of success. You define success for yourself. You are less concerned with how things look and more concerned with how they feel. You choose relationships that nourish your growth, not ones that merely fill your time. You stop performing to fit roles that drain you. Your life becomes less about proving yourself and more about expressing yourself. There's a newfound integrity in how you show up. Your actions, values, and desires begin to align. This alignment doesn't make life perfect, but it makes it real, and in that realness, there is a deep sense of inner peace. Living from soil also means embracing the unknown. The soul doesn't follow a linear path. It's intuitive and non-linear, often leading you toward discomfort for the sake of growth. It asks you to surrender control, To trust that not knowing what's next can be part of the journey. Survival clings to certainty. Soul embraces mystery. The more you learn to trust your inner guidance, the more your life begins to reflect your essence. You'll find synchronicities, clarity, and even miracles you couldn't plan for. Life becomes less about control and more about co-creation. This shift also transforms how you relate to others. In survival, relationships are often based on need, obligation, or fear of abandonment. From the soul, relationships are chosen from love, resonance, and shared evolution. You communicate with honesty. You hold space for others without losing yourself, and you walk away from what no longer aligns without guilt. You begin to honor your energy and time as sacred. Rebuilding from soul rather than survival is a reclamation. It's remembering that you were never here just to exist. You were here to expand, to feel deeply, to grow wildly, and to live honestly. The soul doesn't ask for perfection, it asks for presence. It doesn't want you to be good, it wants you to be whole. When you stop surviving and start living from your soul, you don't just rebuild. You finally come home. Rebuilding yourself is not about becoming someone new for the world to admire. It's about returning to the truth of who you've always been beneath the pain, fear, and conditioning. It's a sacred process of destruction and creation, of shedding what no longer fits and stepping into the life your soul has been quietly waiting for you to claim. It's about facing your shadow with courage, letting go of the false self, walking through pain with open eyes, and creating a new foundation rooted in values, boundaries, and truth. It's about learning to live from the voice of your soul. Not fear, not survival, but deep, unwavering inner wisdom. You're not starting over empty. You're beginning again full of insight, resilience, and the strength forged in every scar. This is your invitation to rise, not in spite of what you've endured, but because of it. You are not here to simply exist. You are here to awaken, to evolve, and to rebuild, this time as your true self. Thank you for being here, for listening, and most of all, for having the courage to rebuild. May you walk forward with clarity, integrity, and a heart open to the life that is waiting for you. Trust yourself. You're not broken, you're becoming. Good luck on your journey, and never forget it. The most powerful foundation you can ever stand on is the one you build within.